Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. If you're looking for the showcase webinar, Extending Core Business Applications, you're in the right place. I'll be your host for today's session, Lucas Drege, Solution Specialist here at AgilePoint, and thank you so much for joining me today. Now we're still seeing a few of your colleagues dialing in here, so let's give them another moment or two before we go ahead and get started. All right, well, thank you for your patience, everyone. Our attendance numbers are looking pretty good here, so let's go ahead and get started. As I touched on earlier, we have a great agenda for you today. This concept of extending core business applications is one that's generated tremendous amounts of interest over the last few years among AgilePoint's customer base, as well as the prospects that we speak to. Now, this is a very important area of any enterprise, right? That is, how do we personalize and extend the core software that we use to run our business to address the unique needs of specific customers, specific areas, teams, or divisions within your organization? And how do we do so in a sustainable manner, right? That minimizes technical debt, allows you to deliver very full-featured applications, and to do so without requiring the most expensive development resources within your organization. Now, I know that a number of you on the line today have been following along with our incredibly successful workshop webinar series. Now, today's showcase webinar is really an extension of that series, right? And I was really blown away. You know, I had some pretty high expectations for this series, right? But the feedback, the attendance was really beyond my wildest imagination. In this past webinar series, for those of you who hadn't had the chance to attend, I think really speaks to the desire in the market to see an enterprise application built from scratch in under 30 minutes. In our first installment in this series, we focused on what we called small applications. These are applications that may not have process, right? They are data-driven, they're forms that we use with SharePoint as an example, and also how we can easily create mobile applications without code. This is a great area for new AgilePoint users to begin building their skills, right? We begin designing user interfaces, and then can build those skills and transfer them to increasingly complex applications. In the second installment in the series, we talked about attacking the application middle ground. Now, this is an area that Forrester Research has deemed the missing link for many digital business transformations. In the second installment of this series, we built a process-based application with integration into multiple different data sources, including databases, SharePoint, and document generation. And finally, in today's installment, we'll be focused around extending core business applications that leverage complex process. Right, and that's really the intent here from an AgilePoint perspective, is to enable our customers to build a single set of skills against a single technology platform, and in turn, deliver a wide range of application types and complexities. Right? Because really, for a given customer, an average customer, we need to be able to deliver all of these different application types to enable a sustainable and complete digital business transformation. So some of you on the phone are probably wondering, what do I mean by a core business app? Right, let's go through a few examples just to set some context. Our ERP system for many organizations is how we run our business. This is the crown jewel of organizational data that might reside in SAP or in NetSuite. An organization is comprised of many different projects, so we often need a tool to manage those projects and understand whether we're ahead of schedule or falling behind. Marketing automation to provide personalized customer engagement for all of the different organizations and customers that you work with. Business intelligence platforms to help us derive wisdom from the data that we capture from across the business. And for today's example, we're going to focus around extending CRM platforms, things like Dynamics as well as Salesforce. So to understand why the AgilePoint approach of customizing our core business platforms is important, let's first spend a few moments talking around the various stages of a CRM implementation. So for most organizations, they start off by deploying CRM as an application. Right? Things are going great. We can now track our leads, our customer engagements, and set reminders to follow up in a timely fashion. But after those initial successes, there becomes a demand for more and more functionality. This is typically where we begin to introduce customization. In some cases, that might be writing Apex code, in the case of Salesforce, adding third-party apps from the various app stores, or other types of third-party solutions. At this stage, we're not really able to keep up with the demand, but we haven't yet reached that tipping point. That tipping point that I mentioned typically comes to the forefront when CRM is no longer viewed as simply an application, but a platform for all of our customer-facing operations. And this is really where the trouble begins to rear its head. We have multiple different types of customization, from custom code, third-party solutions, all of which need to be managed independently of one another. And soon, there's a tremendous weight and cumbersome nature to our CRM platform. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this in the past, right? The more customization we implement on top of a CRM solution, the more unwieldy that platform becomes. And it's really because of that inverse relationship, right, between the complexity of solutions delivered on top of the platform and the overall responsiveness of the CRM platform. Right, so typically this is what we see, right? As the customization becomes greater in scope and greater in complexity, the cost to deliver those customizations shoots through the roof. Now, the AgilePoint approach to customizing our core business applications is one that is much more sustainable and allows us to leverage the respective strengths of each platform. As our base, or our foundation, we have the CRM functionality. These are our leads, our accounts, our contacts, opportunities and support cases, and all of the data from the various customers that we serve. So rather than customizing the CRM system directly, ask yourself, just because I can, does that mean that I should? Well, in many cases, AgilePoint offers a much more scalable approach and one that enables you to deliver customizations of greater complexity much easier and much more cost effectively. AgilePoint comes into the picture here as an architecturally separate layer. And on top of AgilePoint, we build a wide variety of CRM-oriented applications. Now for today, we're going to use the quotation application as an example. But generally speaking, regardless of the types of applications that you're building on top of CRM, leveraging AgilePoint, it results in a few commonalities. Leveraging AgilePoint, I'm able to deliver much more fully featured applications faster. Writing custom code is always an option for any platform that you're working with, but it tends to be a slow, laborious process. And there's oftentimes a large disconnect between the end customization that's delivered and the requirements that have been put forth by the business. Ask yourself this question: in the context of Salesforce, how many users within your organization know and understand Apex programming? There's probably only a handful, right? And another truth there is that most often, these are the most senior and thereby expensive resources across the organization. And then lastly, this concept of layering from an architecture perspective really helps reduce technical debt, right? And means that as a customer, I have the freedom to move to the perhaps cheaper, more innovative CRM platforms because I haven't built all of my customization directly into the CRM. AgilePoint is handling the heavy lifting of moving the data around, going through the various approvals, and all of the other components of an application, meaning that at the end of the day, I'm just leveraging the data. As a result, I can swiftly change from CRM system to CRM system as my business needs might dictate. So why is a quotation application the example for today's webinar? Well, there's really a few major drivers, right? The first of which is quotation accuracy. I can't tell you how many customers have come to us initially where their quotations are driven primarily by an Excel spreadsheet. Excel spreadsheets go through various versions. In some cases, they live on individual users' desktops. Who's to say that I have the latest version? What's more, there's many manual steps, resulting in a large potential for error to be introduced into our process. So having a single point of access for our quotation not only means that we get the latest version of the quotation generator, but that our accuracy is guaranteed 100%. The next is to automate discounting approval based on the levels. How embarrassing would it be to send a quote off to a customer only to remember just after you've hit send that you forgot to get that last director level approval? And then lastly here, really a trend in the market and a major driver for AgilePoint as a whole is to increase responsiveness to our customers. A manual quote can often take days or sometimes weeks to generate per the customer's unique requirements. With a quotation application, as we'll show today, that responsiveness jumps through the roof. And at the end of the day, if we provide these sorts of technology solutions for our employees, we're elevating their experience as a whole. No one likes to do manual work. There's certainly much better uses of our time across the board. And if we elevate that employee experience, there's a direct correlation with the customer experience. By enabling our employees to do their jobs effectively, our customers in turn receive a much higher level of service. Now that can be tough to quantify, but at the end of the day, the result of such an application is happier customers, increased brand loyalty, and of course, the bottom line, more sales in less time. So with that being said, let's take a quick look at the application components here. This application leverages integration with HubSpot for customer data. Now, for the purposes of the webinar today, we've anonymized and removed all of our customer data for the sake of privacy. We have a responsive form with the business logic that drives your business. Conditional approvals based on the discounting percentage that's been applied. We'll auto-generate a quote document after we've received the necessary approvals. And in this case, the quote is saved directly to SharePoint. Now, of course, in your scenario, we might directly save it to the CRM record if need be, and optionally can email a quote directly to the customer from the application. No manual effort required on my end. So with that being said, let's jump into a demo. Okay, so before we run this application, let's take a look at the various components, process flow, and a few ways that this application might be tailored for your business. So the first thing that I'd like to point out here is that this is an eForms driven application, meaning that when a user fills in the form and clicks submit, it starts the process. Now what we've used here up front is a start task, which assumes that the submitter is a user who is authenticated from an AgilePoint perspective. One potential variation that we see very commonly is to have this quote request process initiated by someone who is external to the organization. Think about a request that is initiated by a partner, or perhaps exposed as a link on your website and requested by an end customer. In those cases, I might switch that standard task for an anonymous start task. On the other hand, this quotation might automatically initiate based on a value change or a new object created within your CRM system. Taking Salesforce as an example, if a new opportunity is created, that event might trigger a process to be initiated on the AgilePoint side, where all of the data from that opportunity record is pre-populated and pushed over to your AgilePoint application. Another scenario that we see very commonly is when a value changes for one of those objects. As an example, if we're moving one of our opportunity records from the discovery phase over to the contract or quote phase, that also may initiate a quotation application. So after our submitter inputs some details about the quote that they'd like to generate, we'll evaluate a condition, whether director approval is required or not. In this case, we have a button that controls that process flow, and based on the value for that button, we'll make my process go down the director approval path, or if approval is not required. Now this sort of logic can be evaluated on an automated basis as well, perhaps based on the level of discounting that's been applied in the quote. Moving down to our regional director step, you'll see here that we have 4 potential outcomes. We can reject the request, which will end the process, an option for needing clarification or additional information, approving it and move forward with global director approval, or simply an approval option where we'll begin a series of automated steps. Those automated steps involve recording the quote details in our database. In this case here, we're leveraging AgilePoint's built-in data modeler data entity, but this can also be written to your favorite database provider. We'll loop through to check for additional components and connectors, and add that to the quote tally. And then lastly here, we'll generate a document where we take the application data that was entered into a form and plug it in to a quote template. From here, we'll evaluate one last condition to determine whether the quote should be sent directly to the customer from the business process, or if the salesperson would like to send it manually. So now that we have an understanding of the process as a whole, let's run the application. So as you're seeing here, I have a responsive form that I've styled per my organization's branding requirements. I have global CSS and JavaScript that I can apply once and have all of my applications inherit that styling, as well as an option to inject CSS and JavaScript per form or per application if I have the need. You'll see here at the top, I have the current date as well as a unique quote ID number, something that I can easily refer back to understand the specific instance of the workflow that we need to look at, as well as some details here about the logged in user. You're seeing my name and my email address. So from here, my first decision is what type of customer is this for? If this is for an existing customer, you'll see here that I have a drop down to show company names. And again, for the purposes of privacy, we've anonymized and removed all of our customer data. Alternatively, if this is for a prospect, you'll see that this field becomes a text box where I can input the company name. I'll select the applicable region, And this is going to drive my selection under Regional Director here. So I'll select that this is a US-based customer, and as a result, I'm given my Regional Director. This sort of cascading effect is something that we see very commonly across all of our customer applications and is fairly easily implemented via configuration. Now you'll see here that I have a drop-down list for organizational type. Right? This might have a standard discount that we would offer for a non-governmental organization, an educational institution, government, etc. But for our purposes, we'll leave this as a commercial organization. I'll input my contact's name, their email address, and here I can make the selection as to whether the quote should be automatically sent to my customer as a part of the process. We'll input some contact information here. And as most of you are aware, there are different tiers of service from an AgilePoint perspective. Each of these come with their own included components. Based on the selection that I've made here, I'm presented with a summary of number of development and production environments, support, user seats, as well as application quota. And we can always make adjustments to these a little later on in the form if there's such a requirement. I'll select my deployment option. In this case, we'll go with AgilePoint's shared multi-tenant SaaS environment. And I'm again presented with a summary of all of the included components that come with this level of service. Further down, I have a breakdown of both monthly fees as well as annual commitments. And leveraging this slider here, I can apply the appropriate level of discounting. Now in this case here, we will require director approval, but again, depending on the discounting, we can have this step automatically invoked without any sort of manual intervention on behalf of the salesperson. So let's navigate to my second tab here. From here, we can add additional add-ons and connectors if they're so desired. So in this case, we'll add the mobile app accelerator, which enables our customers to deliver custom branded native mobile applications, as well as a few connectors. Optionally, I can add additional buckets of users and application quota, anonymous user interactions, additional servers, or the extension framework. But for now, let's just click Submit, and we'll move our process on. As you're seeing here, I have a validation message asking me if I'm sure that I want to submit the quotation, and confirmation that the request has been placed. I just heard my inbox go off, which tells me that I have a task to approve. Now in this case here, I'm playing all of the roles within my process just to minimize the need to log in and log out. But I'm presented with a summary of the quote as it's been generated. There's a link to open my task directly from my inbox, or I can leverage AgilePoint's plugin for Outlook and manage my tasks without needing to open AgilePoint. And then of course, there's always the option of AgilePoint's Work Center. So from here, let's view the process and follow along as it executes, and open up the task. Now you're seeing here that I'm pulling this out of the queue, which means that there were a group of users assigned this task. So I've taken the assignment, and I'll now open up the form. Now at this step in my process, all of this data is read-only. As an approver, I simply want to be able to indicate my approval decision and not alter any of the data that's been captured so far. So for the purposes of our demo, I'll just approve this. And in just another moment, I'll receive an email with a link to the quote as it's been stored in SharePoint. And we'll see that come in just another moment. In the interim, we're generating a document. We're taking all of the application data that was captured by the process, and we're inserting it into a template. So here's a link to my quotation. Alternatively, I'll just go over to my SharePoint location and open the document. So as you can see here, right, document generation, even with a complex, potentially repeating structure, is very straightforward to configure with AgilePoint and gives you, as the customer, complete control over the look and feel of the document that gets generated. Okay, so that concludes the demo portion for today. Let's go take some Q&A. All right, thank you everyone. So I'm just seeing some questions here. All right, so the first question is if we can talk a little bit about AgilePoint's pricing model. Absolutely, we can certainly do that. You can always visit our website, agilepoint.com/pricing. So I'll pull that up here and we can talk through it. So as you saw in the slides, right, there's a couple of different tiers of pricing here, and really is sort of a starting point as you look to enable AgilePoint across your organization. Right, so some of the major things to consider here, the number of users, right? That's the first major consideration. And one thing I wanted to point out is that this is a shared or concurrent user model. Right, so typically, if we say have a 1,000 user organization, right, we can typically get by with roughly 200 shared users. Right, now that depends a lot on the volume of applications that you're creating, how often they're running, as an example. Right, but we typically see that 1:4 or 1:5 sort of ratio. The other thing to consider here is number of applications. Right, now this applies to both process and data-driven applications. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that these are not set in stone necessarily, right? We can always add additional components, right? Things like additional connectors, the anonymous user functionality that I mentioned earlier, right? So think of it as a starting point, and we can always add the additional components that we need a la carte. Okay, I'm getting a question on the Outlook plugin that I showed during the demo. So that is a free component that's available from Microsoft AppSource, and that will work for both Office 365 as well as Exchange on-premises. It's a great question. Okay, so we'll leave the questions line open here just for another few moments. But while I have the opportunity, I wanted to talk about some of the upcoming events here from AgilePoint. So on August 8th, we have our regular Getting Started with AgilePoint webinar. This is a great introduction to the platform. If you have colleagues across your organization that are interested in learning more about AgilePoint, some of the challenges that we solve, right? This is a great place for them to get started and learn sort of at the 101 level about our platform. A little bit later on in the month, we'll be doing another showcase webinar series, very similar to what you saw today with a slightly different use case. So while today focused on extending these core business applications, the next is going to focus around building applications that extend your collaboration tools. Right? So by that I mean Microsoft Teams and Slack, right? But you can apply this sort of strategy, right? Building an application around just about any sort of instant messenger or collaboration tool across your organization. And as always, if there's a topic that you'd like to hear more about, something that's come up within your business, please do let me know. Please drop us a line, give us your feedback, right? And let us know what you're interested in seeing more of. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions at the moment then, so I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.